Lighthouse was designed to provide light in times of darkness and encourage unity through partnerships and collaborations on our unbiased, all-in-one platform that integrates the best features of video hosting, social media, and e-commerce. Browse a creator's store while watching their video, and check your newsfeed while continuing to watch the video. Create a post, build communities with groups, or make a custom page. Shop your favorite products while continuing to watch the video, and simply close the video player at any time.
Welcome, fellow brave believers. This is Kingdom Cast. I'm Sean, your host. Appreciate you joining me tonight. This is part 13 of our Investigating Babylon series, and I'm excited about this one. A lot of unique and fun information. I don't really talk about that often on any of my channels, but tonight it's a part of our Investigating Babylon series. We're definitely it matters. We're going to have to dig into it, and I'm excited to present some of the information to you tonight. And some of it actually connects with part 12 as we reviewed NASA. So I think you'll have a good time tonight. I appreciate everybody being here. There's already quite a few people in chat. Hello, everyone. Miss Marsha's back. Windfeather, cover to cover with Jeremy Piers. Pepper Moon, Jasmine W, Earl Rogers, Mike K. Gunder, Jubion Kenobi, Nikki Latimer, Earl Rogers, Mr. Bear, Elias Stewart. Welcome, everyone. There's a whole bunch more. Wally Unpopular is back. Michael John, LJ Angelo. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. So I don't have my tinfoil hat. I thought about actually trying to make one, but I didn't. I've just been so busy all day. But tonight we are going to dig into the ideas of conspiracies, the good and the bad, right? We're going to look into the ideas of how are they used for manipulation and fear, and how are they a right warning from the Father according to his word. So I'm jumping in. You guys ready? Because we got so much to cover. Oh, by the way, real quick, hit the like button, share this video if you like it. Also go to the playlist, Mystery Babylon, on this channel, Kingdom Cast. If you like what we're doing with this series, you can share the entire series by sharing that playlist. And then what else? Oh, yeah, the study guide still in the works. I'm about to release the first release is coming soon. And in fact, I might have to be able to finish up some of that tonight after the show. And so if you're interested in that, as you saw the advert at the beginning there, links in the video description below, and tries to explain, kind of the idea of how you can get involved, get early access before, it's going to take me like a year to finish all the books in the Bible, plus all the extra biblical books. But you can get early access to my progress as I go through our Patreon. So you guys are welcome to check out the links below if you're interested in that. So, but let's jump right to it, guys. Let's get to part 79. No, this is part 13, but this is number 79 of this podcast. And we're looking at the ideas of conspiracy because it seems to be, a pretty strong tool for the enemy and creating fear, getting people to have a fractured mindset where they don't believe anything. Not just that they, might feel like someone's not telling the truth. We all have that kind of indicator that hits us in life. We all have that little moment where we're like, yeah, I don't know if I believe that or not. But unfortunately, we've seen some of the bad side of this idea of conspiracy where people go so far, they don't believe anything. Sometimes you can even I've even had people call me to be a conspire, like a government agent. That's hilarious, actually. There's another YouTube channel that doesn't like me, so they think that I'm a government agent, and I think it's hilarious. But that's the mindset. They can't actually process the information with critical thinking on their own to determine what's good and what's bad. They just have to lump everything that they don't understand or that they initially are suspicious of before they learn more information. They lump it all into the idea of conspiracy. Oh, it must all be somehow coercive and covert, and out to get them in some way. Now, again, it's the Father actually talks about this mindset. So we're going to look at some of that stuff tonight, and we're actually going to look at actual things in the Bible that the Father says were true conspiracies, right? So let's go real quick. We're going to go to 1 Enoch 6, okay? And because the book of Enoch was removed from many of the canons in the United States, as well as other King James-based canons over the past couple hundred years, because this book and other books like it that validate the information in First Enoch, because they were removed, what I'm about to talk about, a lot of people don't really understand from the perspective that I'm going to talk about it, being that this was the first true, by definition, conspiracy in First Enoch 6. Because the idea of a conspiracy is it's going to be usually 5 or more people that have gotten together in a group that have decided they want to do something, and what they want to do is usually bad or illegal or going to hurt someone else. But a group of people, usually 3 to 5 or more, have gotten together to conspire to do something. Okay, so this is the idea. If we're going to stay true to the definitions of words, which I try to do here in Kingdom and Context, and we're also going to try to weed out like I've said, the bad usage of this term, which is what the CIA gave this term. I think it was in the late 60s, where they wanted to now call people that disagreed with government agendas and propaganda, they wanted to call those people conspiracy theorists. It was a derogatory nomenclature that was given to anyone that questioned the official narrative. So, and they still use it to this day. In fact, they've made it even more popular to this day with mass censorship on digital social media, video media, marketplace. It's horrible, right? YouTube had to go to Congress over it. So they've amped and doubled down. They've amped it up. They've doubled down on this idea of what is conspiracy and how are they using this weapon of a word towards people, because they do use it as a weapon. And here in First Enoch, chapter 6, we actually see a true conspiracy, and it's of these watchers that the book of Jubilees tells us they were initially sent to the earth to help mankind, which is what their job. Like all angels are supposed to do that. That is their basic function, their basic role. Hebrews 1:14 tells us that these are ministering spirits of the Lord that are sent out to those who inherit salvation. So that would be perfect with why Jubilee says these initial angels came and they were supposed to help mankind govern themselves. But while they were here, they saw women lusted after them. We have the same story going on in 1 Enoch chapter 6, 1-6, where it says, "And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied in those days, were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose wives from amongst the children of men, and beget children. And Semyaza, who was their leader, he said unto them, I fear you will not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him, said, Let us all swear on oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. And then swear they all together, and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. They were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it." So guys, I don't know if you understand what we just read here. There's literally a geographic place in northern Israel on the border of Syria and Israel today called Mount Hermon. And it was given its name because that was one of the first and biggest conspiracies in all of mankind. We literally have a mountain named after the commemoration of this event. Mountain of the Oath. Not an oath between man and God, but an oath of rebellious angels that actually wanted to do what was against them. Now, the Father goes on later in chapter 15 to express to these angels that they were not appointed wives. They were eternal. They didn't need to procreate. They were not supposed to live on the earth with wives and have families and dwell amongst mankind like that. They were supposed to go back to heaven after their mission was over. So the point is, these angels are exerting their free will, which all sentient beings have this idea. And they even acknowledge, Semyaz acknowledges, as he tries to coerce his fellow watchers to rebel with him, he even acknowledges it's a great sin he's about to do. And then he makes them take an oath to bind themselves with mutual imprecations. Now, if you go further on in the book of Enoch, chapter 69, it says that it expounds on the story a little bit to say that they actually went to try to find out the power of this oath that they send by, so they could give a specific, they could invoke this oath in it with a specific powerful incantation of sorts, with a name that they had to go ask Michael, what is the actual name? And it tells you, and it goes in further detail, but that's really not the point. We're not digging into the etymology of the words or any of that stuff or any implications, but just simply the fact that they knew what they were doing was wrong, and they conspired together to do it, because this is not just a situation of, and it goes on to explain later in Enoch. That's why I can't give you a full synopsis on the book of Enoch tonight, guys. Many of you have heard me teach on it. Go watch season 1 of Honor of Kings on Kingdom and Context. But ultimately, these angels not only took wives to make families, but then they started governing men. Now, that was what they were originally sent to do, but they abused this power, and they started teaching men how to hurt themselves and destroy themselves. They started teaching them great lawlessness, as First Enoch chapter 7 expounds upon it and explains. And because of it, men cried out upon the earth, because there was chaos and lawlessness. They were not living according to how they were created to live, and the angels were expediting this process. They were speeding up the depravity, the wickedness, the lawlessness, doing it through different types of sorcery, pharmakia, and the practices of Babylon that we've already went over in parts 10 and 11. So this was a big deal. Okay, this is the introduction to this story in chapter 6, but you got to keep reading. There's a lot more these guys did as they were doing this deed and bound themselves together in this mutual oath, which was their conspiracy. They're conspiring against humanity so that humanity would kill itself. And this was the doctrines that they taught mankind. And I personally, it doesn't say this, but I've always wondered, was there something greater that they had in mind, so to speak, right? Yes, they saw women, they saw they're beautiful, they wanted to take wives after them, but what does that do? But nothing more than creates the Nephilim, as it explains, whom then they used to help rule with force because they created giants. But what's the purpose? These created beings know heaven and earth. They know the shape of creation. They know the multiple layers of the firmament. They know where the Father is. They know the Father has a ridiculous amount of angels above that are doing what's right. And they know that he has a purpose for mankind. Otherwise, they would have been sent down there to help mankind do what was right. So these angels are helping mankind do what's wrong. In fact, they're pushing mankind to do what's wrong. For what purpose? Is it simply because of the lust of the flesh, because they wanted a wife? No, because they do a whole bunch more other stuff than just take a wife and have kids. If that was all it was, the story wouldn't be the same. As we've went about, in previous parts of this Investigating Babylon, we've expressed how the practices of Babylon were carried forward. The same practices done by the Watchers and the Nephilim through mankind, and taught how mankind this destructive behavior. That same destructive behavior becomes the practices of Babylon after the flood. So why? What's the purpose? I personally think they knew the story of the gospel. They knew the idea that the chosen priest over mankind, as Hebrews 5 chapter verses 1 through 5 tells us, a priest is chosen who's over mankind. He's chosen from among mankind. It has to be that way. So it's interesting that that's why Yeshua had to become, 1 Timothy 3:16, Yeshua had to be manifest in the flesh, seen by angels, told about the world. He had to come in the flesh so that he could be chosen from amongst mankind and validate himself to obedience, as Hebrews 5:7 through 10 explains, to be given this honor of the priesthood, which once he got his resurrected body, which was the plan, he then has not only this priesthood that's greater than any angelic priesthood, but also a body that's greater than any angelic priesthood, because that body will never be able to sin, whereas the angels still can choose to sin if they want. And apparently, once all of mankind's resurrected at this promise of the first resurrection, according to 1 Enoch chapter 5, verse 6 through 9, we will not be able to sin again. So what's interesting about this is this is my theory, my conjecture, but there's a lot going on with this story of this first conspiracy against man to take wives, to have children. They weren't normal children. They could have, I don't know, they possibly could have normal children. I don't think they intended to, because of what we've talked about with the cutting of roots in previous installments where I expound upon pharmakia. And they intentionally did that. So I doubt they were trying to have normal kids. I think that the idea of taking wives, sure, they took an attractive wife as opposed to a non-attractive wife, but that wasn't the whole motivating reason. There was more, because everything else that you put into the story, all the other context, It seems they had a bigger plan, and they followed through with that plan over hundreds of years leading up to the flood. Over 1,000 years. Whether you believe in the Septuagint timeline or the Masoretic, it doesn't matter. It was over 1,000 years either way that they were perpetrating this type of behavior on mankind and getting mankind to do it themselves and ruling over them by force through their offspring, the Nephilim, who were created to attack and destroy mankind. This is what Jubilees chapter 10 tells us. This is the words Noah's praying to the Father. Like the offspring, he even says, you know how your watchers acted in my day. So this is where, to me, it would make perfect sense if they were trying to stop the ability for the Messiah to be born through mankind. It seems to be consistent with what we see in Exodus and also Matthew and Luke, right? So it's very interesting. Very interesting idea of why they would conspire here, but make no mistake, it's 100% conspiracy. It's a group of individuals getting together, intentionally trying to harm other individuals in mass. So it's a big deal. So let's keep going here. We got Genesis 11. We already talked about it. It's obviously in the first two episodes of this installment, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Just as a quick highlight and reminder, guys, the whole world came together except for Noah and his faithful sons, which Shem and his grandsons, right? So except for a very small few people, the entire group of mankind came together a couple hundred years after the flood and determined for 43 years to build a tower that would reach to heaven. They were rebelling against the authority of Yahweh, and they wanted to get to heaven. This is the literal high hand lifted against the throne of God that we're going to read about in a verse later in Exodus 17, where Yahweh actually talks about Amalek raising a hand towards the throne of God. So this is done in another practical way of that idiomatic phrase. This entire place, this entire story of Babylon, the origin of original Babylon and the tower that was built and the city, all of it was going and rejecting the authority of the Father and trying to usurp his authority, literally trying to reach him so they could take him off of his throne and install themselves as the authority, which is obviously it's madness, but this was the madness they collectively engaged in. So it says here in Jubilees 10, 18 to 19, and in the 33rd Jubilee, in the first year of the second week, Peleg took to himself a wife whose name was Lomna, the daughter of Sinar, and she bare him a son in the 4th year of this week, and he called his name Ru, for he said, behold, the children of men have become evil through the wicked purpose of building for themselves a city and a tower in the land of Shinar. And by the way, guys, real quick, in lots of forms of Hebrew, I know I said Ru. I don't know if that's the proper translation or the proper pronunciation of Ru, because Ra in Hebrew is evil. And by the way, that's the name of the Egyptian head god who was against Yahweh and it was evil. So I think there's very fitting that they would name their kid Ru or Ra, depends on how you want to say it, and what language this particularly is translated from. It's actually from the Greek, because that's where Jubilees was translated from by R.H. Charles. So therefore, it's very likely it was originally Ra in the Hebrew. But the point is, he says this whole name was dedicated to this idea that the children of men have become evil through the wicked purpose of building for themselves a city and a tower in the land of Shinar. This is the second largest conspiracy in history, but until we get to Revelation. For they departed from the land of Ararat eastward to Shinar. From these days they built the city and the tower, saying, go, let us ascend thereby into heaven. So they knew how the shape of creation looked. They knew it wasn't a ball in space. They knew there was a covering over them called the Shemayim, originally called the firmament, the Rakia. They understood what the Creator made because Noah told them where the floodwaters came from in Genesis 7:11 when they came through the windows of the firmament. He told them why there was water up there, because on day 2, the firmament separated the waters from below from the waters above. There's still water up there even to this day. So they understood the shape of creation and what the Creator made. And that's why they collectively were building a tower trying to get through the first level to get up to these other levels. Okay, it's like a bad version of Donkey Kong. And that, all pun intended, because, you know, if you believe Jasher, that's part of the judgment when these guys were dispersed, some of them were turned into apes. So the point is, it is like a bad version of Donkey Kong. You know, it's like a Donkey Kong, I should say, would be a twisted version of this, right? Because they're trying to ascend and Donkey Kong is throwing the barrels down. That would be like God stopping them. So anyway, not all my metaphors are on point, guys. Just give me some grace. But the idea is that this absolutely is this one of the biggest conspiracies, literally the world coming together. Now, guess what? As we've talked about in previous episodes, Abraham was a son of the priest of the king of Babylon. So Terah, right-hand man and priest of Nimrod. Abraham is the son of Terah. Abraham pulls away from this wicked behavior and learns the ways of Yahweh. So do you think that Abraham would have been persecuted by these people if he had stayed? In fact, in Jubilees chapter 11, he talks about how he tried to address their wicked behavior, and then he's praying to the Lord, I can't go back to Chaldea. They seek my life. Yes, that he was persecuted by people conspiring against the ways of Yahweh, in the ways of Babylon. And of course, the people that resist those machinations of purpose and deed are going to get persecuted. They're the odd men out. They're the people that are stopping progress. So, same thing with Noah. He would have been persecuted. I don't know if he was attacked. I don't know how he died. It doesn't say. Obviously, the scriptures both all account that he lived another 300 plus years after the flood. It's over 900 years. So that's wonderful, but we don't know how he died. We don't know what those 300 years were like. We know he was grieved because he was doing the righteous ways of Yahweh. So he's therefore going to be grieved with watching all this behavior happen and then picking up the ways of the Nephilim from before the flood, which is occult behavior. Jubilees 46. We'll keep going. More conspiracy in Scripture. In Jubilees 46, 11 through 16, and it says, the king of Canaan was victorious over the king of Egypt. He closed the gates of Egypt. He devised an evil device against the children of Israel of afflicting them. And he said to the people of Egypt, behold, the people of the children of Israel have increased and multiplied more than us, more than we. Come and let us deal wisely with them before they become too many. Let us afflict them with slavery before war come upon us, and before they too fight against us. Else they will join themselves unto our enemies and get them up out of our land, for their hearts and faces are toward the land of Canaan. And he set over them taskmasters to afflict them with slavery. They built strong cities for Pharaoh, Pithom, Ramses, and they built all the walls and all the fortifications which had fallen in the cities of Egypt. And they made themselves serve with rigor. And the more they dealt evilly with them, the more they increased and multiplied. And the people of Egypt abominated the children of Israel. So guys, this just isn't the new Pharaoh that took over. He convinced the people to conspire against an entire other people group. A people group who were doing what? I didn't actually have this pulled up, but if you read earlier up in Jubilees 46, during the days of Joseph, all the brothers of Joseph and all their family that lived with Jacob, Israel, in the land of Goshen, because they all traveled down there, and then they started flourishing during the lifespan of Joseph. And it says they all dealt with each other with brotherly love and kindness, and they did the commandments. This is what's so beautiful about the testimony of the 12 patriarchs. Each of the sons of Joseph on their deathbed are telling all their children, all their descendants, every single one of them, my sons, you got to do the commandments of God. It's wisdom, it's righteousness, it'll save you. Here's what happened to me when I didn't do them. Here's what happened when I started doing them. Your brother Joseph's amazing. He's been doing them better than all of us. You got to do the commandments of God. You got to do the commandments of God. Every one of the sons of Israel told their children and grandchildren, do the commandments of the Lord. It is the law of the Lord, and you have to do it. It's what the angels are doing in heaven, according to the testament of Levi. So they were flourishing, according to the beginning of Jubilees 46, in Goshen, in peace and in righteousness, which is the right behavior of the law of the Lord. And here comes the king of Canaan, comes in, defeats the king of Egypt, and says, all right, well, all these, we know, he knows the history of Jacob and the Israelites. That's why he tells the Egyptians, hey, guys, they're not really loyal to you, even though they're living in your land, and they've been prospering, they haven't been causing any problems. They're not really loyal to you because their face is set toward Canaan. So the moment they have the chance for an alliance, they're going to turn on you. That is paranoia bred into the people to get the people. This is conspiracy in the beginning. You have to create a crisis so that you can have the solution. We see this all the day long. We've seen this for the past year all over the world with the nonsense Rona. They have to create a problem to bring about a solution. This king of Canaan, now the new king of Egypt, creates a problem in the minds of the Egyptians so they all can conspire against the Hebrews. This is the evil form of people conspiring towards good people out of fear and paranoia that's not founded on truth. The Hebrews weren't hurting anybody. They weren't doing anything. It says they were just living brotherly kindness. They were just doing their own thing until people stirred them, rounded of the hearts and the minds and the fears and the paranoias of people living around them against the Hebrews. So this is why it says at the very end, and here in verse 16, it says, the people of Egypt abominated the children of Israel. And we see how this plays out, Exodus chapters 1, Jubilees 46 and 47. So it gets to the point where they're literally killing the babies of the Hebrews. And they're afflicting them. They're hating them. They won't even eat with them. But when the God of the Israelites shows up, some of them want to join forces and leave with them. It's interesting, huh? So this is the mindset that is created within the practices of Babylon, within the cultures and the cities, the governments, of the influence of corrupt, unrighteous rulership over people that implores the practices of Babylon. It creates fear, ignorance to the point of not even looking around you to judge your circumstances and to see that what you're being told isn't correct. Blind allegiance to destructive concepts, and eventually death, strife, internal chaos, lots of chaos. We see that in all types of countries where it happens. We've seen it in our country, in the United States. We're seeing it today. We're seeing the fear and the paranoia being pitted against groups of people that have to believe unscientific things versus other groups of people that are willing to research scientific ideas and scientific things, and also stand on the word of God, which actually is validated by the science. Yeah, you're right, Paul. There's nothing new under the sun. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go further into the broadcast. Don't miss the ending, guys, because we're going to be talking about aliens. Because there's a lot that's going on with the machinations, the types of conspiracy that Babylon has always implored, and they just figure out different ways to rebrand these deceptions and bring them on new people groups. So we're gonna stick with this till the end. 1 Samuel 13. All right, many of you might recognize this, but this is during the days of Saul and David, and we have their interactions with the Philistines. But if you see here, it says in 1 Samuel 13, 19 through 22, no blacksmith could be found in all the land of Israel because the Philistines had said the Hebrews must not be allowed to make swords or spears. Instead, all the Israelites would go down to the Philistines to sharpen their plowshares, their mattocks, their axes, and their sickles. The charge was a pem for sharpening a plowshare or a mattock, a third of a shekel for sharpening a pitchfork or an axe, and a third of a shekel for repointing an ox goad. So on the day of battle, not a sword or a spear could be found in the hands of the troops with Saul and Jonathan. Only Saul and his son Jonathan had weapons. Oh, that sounds like a tax that you get when you try to go buy a gun. But essentially, that's the same idea, guys. They'd put the Philistines, who are ruling over, in a sense, the territory, alongside the Amorites, the Hittites, and the Kenites and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, excuse me, alongside those other people groups, the five lords of the Philistines, bound together, each of them, and we're going to go over who the Philistines were. Each of them bound together to enforce this weapons ban. Why? Intentionally, so they could weaken the defensive posture of the Hebrews. Guys, this is literally the modern day political battle we're seeing against the Second Amendment in the United States right now. Australia's already been taken over. They can't have guns in Britain or Australia or in Canada. Like, yeah, they can have a few hunting guns, but it's nothing that would actually protect them. They've literally, and it's all under the crown, of course, so it's par for the course. But it's the same concept. How, to a corrupt ruler, it's a big deal if the people that you're trying to rule over have the ability and the weapons to take you out of your place of authority. So this is why they want to limit the types of weapons you can have. And to this point, in 1 Samuel 13, the Philistines were even limiting how often they could sharpen their weapons. That's crazy. That is crazy. Oh, Miss Wendy, I'm not sure where you live. I don't know if you're in England or in Australia or New Zealand. I'm not sure where you are, but yeah, there's quite a few countries. I mean, you can't have weapons. China, you can't have weapons. You can't have guns. That's why they've had, there's been reports, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but there's been reports in the United States of um, mass knife attacks because they don't have guns to shoot with. And I know, and also in the UK, there's reports again, whether they're true or not, it's hard to verify, but there's reports of because they can't get an assault weapon or an automatic weapon or even a pistol, they end up having to use their car as a weapon to try to hurt people. So yeah, it's rough. Oh, you're in South Africa? Okay. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, yeah, it's this is one of the huge indicators of the mindset of Babylonian control and the ability for them to go in and try to figure out systematic ways to keep the people under their control. One of them is weapons have always been like this, even back in the Bible. And who are the Philistines, right? What does this matter? You're saying, well, Sean, these are the Philistines. I mean, is this Babylon? What are you talking about? I thought this was investigating Babylon. Who are the Philistines? Well, the Philistines are the city-states in Canaan. Did you guys know that there were city-states in Canaan? Many people think, I thought that was just the Greeks. And you're like, wait a minute. Didn't we talk about in previous installments of this series that the Greeks were actually worshiping the same gods and doing the same behavior of Egypt and Babylon and Assyria and Canaan? And oh yeah, the Egyptians ruled over Egypt for 1,000 years at one point. It's interesting what you miss, but you're not told in history class. You also have the seafaring people, the Philistines, because they lived on the plains of the coast here on the western side or the eastern side of the Mediterranean. They interacted with all the peoples in the Mediterranean. They were a huge seafaring nation, rose to power through trade. And here they had the 5 city-states that were independently governed, but they called themselves the Philistines. It was Gaza, Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gath. You guys remember David and Goliath? Goliath was from Gath. So they're mixed with Nephilim as well. So we know where those practices come from because you've watched previous episodes of what we talked about, where these Nephilim come from. Go see installment 3, part 3 of this series if you're interested. So huge indicator that they're worshiping Shamash and Baal, Dagon, right? These are all the gods of the Babylonians. They just have specific regional names according to their dialect. But these 5 city-states with individual kings bound together in unity to oppress the Hebrews. Isn't that interesting? Oh, by the way, they had alliances with the Kenites, the Amorites, the Ammonites, and the Canaanites because they're all worshiping the same gods. And they hate the God of Israel, and they hate the people of Israel. So therefore, they tried to root them out of the land, and then when they couldn't, they tried to incrementally take them over. This is the whole book of Judges. Like it's over and over and over again. You have Israelite rebels against the covenant, and they start, losing territory to the people in the land, a mixture of the Canaanites and the Philistines and different people, to where they're now being subjugated by the people around them, which was exactly what the Father told them, Leviticus 45 and Deuteronomy 27:28. If you don't do the terms of the covenant, you're going to start being ruled over by your enemies. It's going to be really bad for you. So this is just one of the ways we see them doing that, and it's a weapons ban, I should say, not gun, but a sword weapons ban. So here in 1 Samuel 6:16 and 16 and 17, it says, when the 5 rulers of the Philistines saw this, they returned to Ekron that same day as a guilt offering to the Lord. The Philistines sent back 1 gold tumor for each city: Ashdod, Gaza, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. I'm just putting this up here to show you guys these were individually ruled by different rulers. They were a confederacy. So there's literally doesn't get more official when it comes to the definition of a conspiracy than this. Daniel chapter 6, the famous Daniel chapter 6. We have righteous Daniel getting falsely accused and manipulation of the law to imprison him. But why? Daniel chapter 6, 4-5. Thus, the administrators and the satraps sought a charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no charge of corruption because he was trustworthy, and no negligence or corruption was found in him. Finally, these men said, we will never find any charge against this Daniel unless we find something against him concerning the law of his God. Daniel's in Babylon, guys. So he's in the heart of Babylon. He's also reaping the benefits of the covenant, just as was expressed in Leviticus 26, that if you do the covenant, even when you're in the land of your exiles, I'll show you mercy and favor amongst those who rule over you. And Daniel is maximizing that promise in Leviticus 26 in his reign between 3 or 4 different kings that changed hands. He's never killed. He's at one point, it seems like he rules the entire nation for about 7 years when Nebuchadnezzar goes crazy. And all the kings respect him and love him, except for these 3 posers, right? So those 3 dudes, they're wanting to figure out a way to entrap Daniel, and they're like, all right, man, his character, he's just got too much character. Like, well, guess where that comes from? Oh, it's doing the law of his God. So they're again saying, okay, well, we got to figure out a way to manipulate the law of his God against him, so that they're wanting to slander him, literally, which will lead to his death. So they're going to do anti-Torah behavior because Daniel's Torah behavior was so awesome, even in the land where the Torah is not native, right? In the land where they're in Babylon, literally in Babylon. So these guys conspire against David to try to get him, or excuse me, Daniel, to try to get him killed. And it's truly, to me, it's absolutely what we're seeing today in a variety of ways. I mean, people in Canada have already been, for preaching that Leviticus 18 through 20 is correct, meaning, or Romans chapter 1, that woman should not lie with woman, man should not lie with man. For preaching that and for preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, much less the kingdom, people are getting arrested in Canada today. They do not have the same laws of free speech because they're basically the free speech that the Canadians wanting to have to preach the law of God is, hey man, this is not behavior that's good for you. That's the behavior of Babylon. Canadian government says, we like that behavior, and if you say anything against it, try to confess your law of your God against our behavior, which is the law of our God, then we're going to come after you. So it's also happening in the United States in a variety of ways. There's ongoing fights with the abortion issue in the United States, a variety of ongoing ways. People are trying to fight it. And the enemy keeps trying to advance. It's been legislated to the highest courts to say that it's okay and you can do it. People struggle against it. People have gone to jail protesting against it. It's crazy, guys. It's crazy. So this is the same concept that we're seeing back in Daniel's day, literally as an advisor to the king, having an issue with the other advisors who are conspiring against him. So these are, again, they didn't even have to put paranoia in the mind of the king. They just got the king through legal legislation to sign something that then entrapped Daniel when he wanted to pray to Yahweh. And Daniel's not even getting to actually worship according to the biblical definition of worship. He's not getting to go and participate in the feast days like he wants, or he's not getting to go. And I mean, I don't know if he was doing it privately in his home, but he's definitely not outwardly and openly. There's no temple for him to go to. There's no priesthood he can go and talk to and confess his sins. I mean, he's literally just praying to the Father in heaven above every day. Well, thankfully, we're told that there's anyway, I'm not going to go into that. Let me make sure I stay on point here. So the point is, this is a type of conspiracy that is not overt. Philistines, weapons ban, overt. All the worlds come together to create the Tower of Babel, to literally try to go kill God. That's overt. Okay. Nephilim being made from a hybrid union of angel and womankind. That's overt. This is a subtle form that we see happening all the time in our nation and other nations around the world. But you don't always see it happening. You don't always see this conversation that we see in Daniel 6. We don't get a camera. We don't get the fly on the wall version of seeing that like the story tells us, because we now, in our modern times, see the effects of these conversations. We see the after effects of people that are lobbying specific laws that get passed through House and Congress later that then have all these negative effects upon the people, and specifically people of faith. Just like all these coronavirus restrictions that got passed in all these states last year, and then suddenly in Louisiana, they're telling people you can't congregate for church, and they're literally arresting people that were trying to. This started way back a year ago in May of 2020, and it's progressed. And it was for 6-7 months in the United States. It was getting worse and worse. People were doing online church instead of actually congregating in person, which was a part of their faith, a part of their expression of how they worship God, and also encouraged in the scriptures. And they're still being persecuted for that in Canada. People being arrested for that. There's, according to our friends in Canada, there's people literally meeting in the woods to have church in Canada privately, leaving their cell phones in the cities and going out privately to meet in the woods. That's how bad it's gotten. And why? Because of legal, unlawful ordinances that were passed based off a conspiracy, which was mass control over people to get them afraid of sickness. By the way, the flu disappeared. I don't know where it went, but suddenly we got this new thing. So all the 80 million people a year in the United States that got the flu, apparently they don't get the flu anymore. So anyway, don't worry about that. I'm sure the CDC is not wrong about that, but don't ask questions about the flu. We shouldn't ask. We just believe whatever they say. So the point is, it's crazy, guys. They, through fear and conspiracy, for the last year, through legal ordinance, they've gotten people to now not be able to actually follow their faith as they normally did. This is the same thing that we see happening to Daniel. It's horrible. Esther chapter 9, same concept. This one gets a little more severe. It's not just trying to kill Daniel, it's trying to kill all of the Hebrews, all of the Jewish people that are in exile. Esther chapter 9, but we're going to kind of dig into this one a little bit because there's something here that a lot of people never talk about. This is verse 24 and 25. Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them and had cast pur, that is the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when it became before the king, he commanded by letter that the wicked scheme which Haman had devised against the Jews should come back upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Now, a lot of people don't realize that there's a reason why it says at the very beginning here, Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews. It's not just like this guy alone just said, hey, I don't like these Jewish people that you have in exile all scattered throughout your 127 provinces, which is what we see earlier in Esther. It's not like he just one day decided, yeah, I don't like you. I don't think you should have brought them in exile. You should have just killed them all when we invaded northern Israel. But instead, no, there's a reason why he's being called the enemy of all the Jews. And it's this, 1 Samuel 15. Saul said unto Samuel, yea, I've obeyed the voice of the Lord, and I've gone the way which the Lord sent me, and I brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. Interesting. Here's this. Now we have the Agag being a king of Amalek and the clan of the Amalekites, which existed in the land of Israel next to the Philistines, next to the Kenites. It's approximately the territory of Benjamin and Simeon. So what in the world? Where'd this come from? Oh, there's a reason for that. It's the same back here. Exodus 17, 13 through 16. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek, his army, with the sword. And the Lord said to Moses, write this on the scroll as a reminder and recite it to Joshua, because I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and named it, the Lord is my banner. Indeed, he said, a hand was lifted up toward the throne of the Lord. The Lord will war against Amalek from generation to generation. So this idea of that Haman in Esther 9 was called an Agagite is not just by coincidence. And the fact that he's considered the enemy of the Jews, that's not by coincidence. He was a long-standing descendant that had been forced and driven out of the land by Saul in pieces, and then by David finally. And he was from the Amalekites. The Amalekites in Exodus 17 were the first people to attack the Israelites coming out of the Exodus, picking off the stragglers and the weak ones, and enraged Yahweh. And Yahweh said, I'll be at war with them forever. Oh, it gets more though. Where did Amalek come from? Why did they even attack Israel coming out of the Exodus? The Egyptian king that ruled over them with tyranny, also from Canaan, he was destroyed. Who else is there? What's going on? Why has Amalek suddenly got beef and trying to attack the Israelites when they come out of the Exodus? In Numbers chapter 24, verse 20, Balaam, yeah, he wasn't a good prophet in the end, but he had this unique moment here in chapter 24 where he prophesied, and he said some really amazing things. One of them, he says, and when he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable, and he said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. When were there nations, guys? We've been doing this Investigating Babylon series. We're in part 13 now. So after 12 other parts, when were there nations? Were there nations before the flood? What does the nations mean? The word nations means Gentiles. Also just means the people of the nations. That's what the word Gentiles means. And you are Gentile or of the nations if you're not in Israel. What happened after the flood with Noah being of Israel, 100%? Yes, I know Israel wasn't born yet. Jacob wasn't born yet. But he is in the quote-unquote nation of Israel. By the way, the word Israel was given to Jacob from heaven because that's what they call themselves in heaven. The family of covenant behavior people in heaven are called Israel. So that's why Noah, doing the covenant, faithfully and righteous as a high priest on earth, trying to teach Shem and his other sons how to do the covenant properly, they're in Israel too. Suddenly, as the Tower of Babel is being built, and then their languages get dispersed, they go off and they become nations. Amalek was the first of the nations. So we've got, in the story of Esther, guys, we've got like a bad cyst that finally reaches the surface and needs to be popped. You got this dude Haman under the control of the empire of Babylon. He got swallowed up in the 127 different provinces that were taken over by Nebuchadnezzar and all the other Assyrian kings. He got swallowed up in the empire of Babylon, just like Zedekiah, king of Israel, of southern Israel, got the kingdom of Judah. He got swallowed up, right? He didn't live very long, but he got swallowed up, just like a lot of kings would get swallowed up into the emperor of Babylon. And here it is. Amalek was one of the first of the nations. So their descendants, it traces way back. They always hated the Hebrews. They always hated the people of the covenant. And he is a long-standing descendant of that and tries to enact this conspiracy so that he can kill all of the Hebrews, just like they tried to do back in Exodus 17. So what's interesting is my wife, I don't know if you're still watching right now, sweetie, or if you've fallen asleep, but my wife, she said that several years ago, she actually saw a documentary. And of course, YouTube's gotten increasingly bad with censorship and not recommending videos that are related and that kind of stuff. And so she claims she saw an actual documentary of someone that had come out of an abusive family and a cult family, and that this person was sharing their testimony. And they claimed that they were told as children that they were from the family of the Amalekites and that the God of the Bible was evil and hated them, and that he was not really God, and that there were other entities that were really God, and they weren't supposed to love the God of the Bible. They weren't there. He was their sworn enemy to their family. So this is a testimony, and I don't know if this was this interview was this person was religious based. I don't know if you're still watching, Lindsay, if you want to put that in the chat maybe, but all I know is that it was fascinating for her to see this, and then for us to study the scriptures, and she realized, oh my gosh, this is modern day. This person claims that their family told them they were Amalekites, that they were sworn enemies with Yahweh. That's intense. Babylon is alive and well, guys. It's alive and well. It's been going on for a long time. They've just gotten really, really, really good at trying to make it seem like they don't still exist. I want to give people the illusion that they're governing themselves. Okay, so my wife is still awake, and she says no, that he hadn't come to Christ. Well, I didn't mean to give the impression that we came to Christ. I just meant his testimony about what he was talking about coming out of his family and not being. If I'm wrong, let me know. But I believe you told me that part of his testimony was that he didn't want to be associated with his family anymore. You're saying he was a New Ager kind of. So either way, apparently he had an actual sworn testimony of being his family were Amalekites. It's crazy to me. Crazy, crazy. Oh, I'm so happy you're still awake. Yeah, she's had a long day. She's had a long month. So she's been falling asleep early. So anyway, guys, this is what's so interesting about the story of Esther. A lot of people don't realize is that there's some long-standing family feuds. I mean, we're talking all the way back to Babylon. So you guys understand the story of okay, one second. She's saying he was interviewed on a New Age type podcast and did leave his family, but not to become a Christian. Okay, that's fine. Anyway, his testimony still stands. That's fine. I appreciate the clarification, sweetie. So we're going all the way back to Babylon. Think about what the story is in Jubilees 10 and Genesis 11 of the Tower of Babel, when the nations first were dispersed according to their languages. You have, this is why in Genesis 10 it gives you all the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and it says these were the descendants of these kids, and they were divided up into their lands and their tongues, what they spoke, and their nations. By the way, Genesis 10 and 11, in my opinion, should be swapped. I don't think they're anachronistic. I think that they're out of order. I think Genesis 10's information should be after Genesis 11 because it actually gives you the full breakdown, especially because it goes into people that were born much further after Genesis 11. But whatever. I wasn't one of the scribes that compiled the writings of Genesis. So the point is, it's interesting that all the way back to Babylon, you have this mention of these Amalekites, and they're constantly inserting themselves in the story amongst these other clans that hate Israel and trying to kill them as well. Why? Why would you care about these people of the covenant? Why would it matter? Because if you went back to one of the first nations that was with the Tower of Babel in Babylon, then you know Noah didn't take part in that. Shem didn't take part in that. Abraham didn't take part in that. They were serving the Most High God. And who's responsible for destroying the efforts of Babylon? The Most High God. Sent his angels. Some people believe even he himself came down as well. Possible. But the point is, they know who they were fighting. So if they just, one of the greatest conspiracies ever, the Tower of Babel, was thwarted by the Most High God. Well, they're going to go after the Most High God's children. Why? Because that's what the occult does. That's what the enemy does. And we'll keep looking into it. John chapter 11. I apologize, guys. I messed up. It's supposed to be John chapter 11 on the slide here. Hang on. I don't know why it said that. I don't know why it does that. Let's try this again here. John chapter 11, 53 and 54. So that from that day on, they plotted to kill Yeshua, Jesus. As a result, Yeshua no longer went about publicly among the Jews, but he withdrew to a town called Ephraim in an area near the wilderness. He stayed there with the disciples. Now, I'm not going over every single instance in Scripture, guys, but there was a lot of them. Obviously, we're skipping the birth of Jesus. We skipped the Maccabees. I mean, I'm just trying to focus on a few of them because I got some other stuff to talk about at the end. So I want to give enough time. But guys, this is the chief priests, the scribes, the Pharisees. They're all conspiring. Large group of people under the authority of Rome. They're conspiring because these priests were implanted by Rome, and that is actually expressed in the Hasmonean writings in the 1st and 2nd century BC. These guys were plants from Rome. So this, I know many people may be saying, well, Sean, how does this fall into a conspiracy? Like, this is just the friction that Yeshua faced with the religious leaders of his day because he was disagreeing with their teachings and trying to teach them sound doctrine from the Torah. No, guys, these guys were implanted by the ruling empire that was over lots of nations. And they killed them under their authority with the go-ahead from Pilate. A lot of people say, well, but Pilate has a struggle with conscience. He was told that, he washed his hands, but no, he literally went ahead with it. It was a part of it. It was destined for one, but it was also a part of the Pharisees that were and the priests of that day, supposedly, because they're supposedly, if I haven't done a video on it yet, but this goes into other details that they weren't supposed to be the priesthood. They were implanted and chosen from the Greeks, and the Romans took over. And then this is all during the Maccabees leading up to the days of Yeshua, and they ended up taking over the priesthood. And there was a big friction with that was why there was friction with the Sadducees, because the Sadducees claimed they were of the actual descendancy of the Levites. That's also hard to contest, hard to validate. But the point is, there was a lot of friction there about the ruling class of the Hebrew people, which was their priesthood during the days of Yeshua. Yeshua comes along and tells them that they're all not doing the law. They're all doing it properly. They're doing their own traditions. And they're like, all right, well, since we're in the ilks of power underneath the hand of the emperor, yeah, we're just going to kill you because you're a person of the covenant. We're doing the ways of Babylon, which are the traditions of man, and we're going to kill you. And that's what they did to Yeshua, right? Thankfully, death couldn't hold him down. So, guys, this is actually why. Let me go here real quick. This is actually why we have this passage in Isaiah chapter 8. When the Assyrian invasion was prophesied through Isaiah and other prophets, during the days of the apostasy, approximately 6th century BC in Israel, the northern house and the southern house were both in apostasy. So the Assyrians were, the Father through his prophets told the Israelites, both north and southern house, that, hey, the Assyrians are going to come in, take you over, and later the Babylonians are going to come in. So, because they were abandoning the ways of the covenant. So therefore, it says in verse 1, the Lord said to me, take a large scroll and write on it with an ordinary stylus, Mahar Shalal Hashbaz, and I will appoint for myself trustworthy witnesses, Uriah the priest and Zechariah son of Jeberechiah. I had relations with the prophetess, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. The Lord said to me, name him Mahar Shalal Hashbaz. For before the boy knows how to cry mother or father, the wealth of Damascus and the plunder of Samaria will be carried off by the king of Assyria, because they were invading all the lands around Israel. And by the way, this is the prophet Isaiah. How interesting that his wife is called a prophetess. That means she's doing the law of God. She's a woman of God, and she's teaching other women how to do the law of God, possibly even getting words from the Lord, as Isaiah did. So, verse 5, the Lord spoke to me further, because this people had rejected the gently flowing waters of Shiloh, and rejoiced in Rezin and the son of Remaliah. So these are the God. This is a reference to turning from the covenant, because the waters of Shiloh would have been a reference to where the temple of God was in the past, and rejoiced in Rezin and Remaliah. This is a reference to some of the gods of other nations around them, from the Canaanites and the Philistines. The Lord will surely bring against them the mighty floodwaters of the Euphrates, the king of Assyria, and all his pomp. It will overflow its channels and overrun its banks. It will pour into Judah, swirling and sweeping over it, reaching up to the neck. Its spreading streams will cover your entire land, O Emmanuel. Huddle together, O peoples, and be shattered. Pay attention, all you distant lands. Prepare for battle. Be shattered. Prepare for battle and be shattered. Devise a plan, but it will be thwarted. State a proposal, but it will not happen. For God is with us. So he's quoting their plan that they're trying to state. He's trying to say, look, these people are, even after he prophesies that the Assyrians will come in and invade them, the people refused to believe his prophecy because they didn't follow Isaiah as a prophet, because they were doing the ways of Baal. They were not doing the ways of Yahweh. They didn't give credence, or respect to Isaiah or his prophecies. So that's why he's kind of quoting their banter, right? Where he would say, hey, you're going to get swept over, both Israel and Judah, by the kings of Assyria. And he's basically speaking for them in their mockery against him in return. It's kind of like it's kind of like a rhetorical passage here, where he's saying that they're going to be saying, oh, prepare for battle, be shattered. Devise a plan, but it will be thwarted, right? Unfortunately, the translator did a poor job with placing the quotations in here. There's none in original Hebrew. State a proposal, but it will not happen, for God is with us. So he's saying the people in that day, they were claiming, and we see this in other places in Isaiah and also Jeremiah, they were claiming, oh, God is with us. We worship God. But no, they weren't. They were also worshiping Baal. They thought they could be polytheistic and worship all the other gods of the surrounding nations plus Yahweh, and Yahweh was absolutely disgusted by it, because the behaviors are opposite of each other. So therefore, he goes in and he tells them, you're going to be taken over. And the people are like, oh, no, we'll devise a plan. We'll prepare for battle. God's with us. And Isaiah's like, man, you're crazy. He goes on to say, I'm trying to give you the context to understand what happens here. Verse 11, for this is what the Lord has spoken to me with a strong hand, instructing me not to walk in the way of this people, because those people were worshiping Baal. Verse 12, do not call conspiracy everything these people regard as conspiracy. Do not fear what they fear. Do not live in dread. The Lord of hosts is the one you shall regard as set apart as holy. Only he should be feared, and only he should be dreaded, and he will be a sanctuary. But to both houses of Israel, he's the stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. To the dwellers of Jerusalem, he's like a trap and a snare. Many will stumble over these. They will fall and be broken. They will be ensnared and captured. So he goes on and continue prophesying, but the whole point is he's calling out Baal worshippers who also think that they have God on their side to help them against the exact promise of the covenant that Yahweh had already told them a long time ago, which was, if you stop doing my covenant behavior, your enemies are going to invade you and they will win, and you're going to have problems. So this is, and Isaiah is saying, like, hey, but this is about to happen, guys. This is about to happen. So I'm not going to walk in your ways. I'm not going to behave like you. And all these things that you guys think are conspiracy, and it doesn't even enunciate everything that they thought was conspiracy in those days. He's just saying that's not real conspiracy. He just told them the real conspiracy. This is the blind madness that we also see in our day as well. Isaiah just told them, here, the Assyrian Empire, which is an amalgamation of lots of different nations, is about to attack you. They're conspiring to come to you and attack you. And these people are like, no, we'll be fine. We'll be prepared for battle. We got God with us. Oh, but there's these other conspiracies we're worried about. You guys thought the CIA made up the idea of conspiracy? No, it's right here in Isaiah's day. Nothing new under the sun, guys. So here we have, in the days of Yeshua, truly, against the ultimate character, the entire, it comes to a finality, a kind of a pinpoint, if you will, where these people that have been put into this place, by the way, the Pharisees came over from Babylon, bringing all these traditions with them, which is just hilarious to me, because that's exactly what we see with modern day Judaism. That's exactly what we see with the occult. They have tons of rituals and traditions that they view as religious behavior, and Yahweh's like, that's not my ways. What are you doing? So here comes the Son of Yahweh, prophesied sent Messiah, exhibiting the ways of the Father, doing them perfectly, and he runs into a bunch of people from Babylon with Babylonian mindsets under the empire of Babylon. Yeah, I know it was called the Romans at the time, but it was the same. You have to research the history. The Romans took it over from the Greeks. The Greeks literally set up their headquarters in Babylon through Alexander the Great, just a few 250 years before Yeshua's birth. You have to research the history there, guys. It's all Babylon. It's always been Babylon. They just go through different names. This is how they trick people. Ephesians chapter 6. Paul exhorts, he says, finally be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can make your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this world's darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly realms. Ephesians 6, 10 through 12. So, who are those spiritual forces in heavenly realms? Who are those? And by the way, that's not above the firmament. We're going to get into the exact location of the heavenly realms as we get to the last three episodes of this Investigating Babylon series. I'm not actually going to express to you where Satan is, and according to the scriptures, yes, he can rally around the earth, but like, where's his actual home base? Like, where's he chilling? You guys didn't think about that? You guys think he goes home and goes to sleep in heaven every day? And back to where the angels live above the firmament? You think he just goes back there and just hangs out and just lives with them? And it's like, hey guys, I'm going back to work tomorrow. I'm just going to go down to the earth and I'm going to go create some more problems. See you guys down there. You guys think that's how he rolls? You guys think the Father is going to let him abide, even though Jude 1:6 says they left their first habitation? Now, yes, we see Satan go back in Job 1 and 2 and present himself before the Lord. And what does the Lord say? He's kind of surprised. Where'd you come from? Because it's not normal. So, yeah, keep with us. We're going to explain the heavenly realms. We're going to go into greater depth about the location of what this statement what is it referring to, and actual Satan's home base. But the forces of evil are expressed to us in what we've talked about from Jubilees chapter 10 in previous episodes, specifically with the post-Nephilim and part 3 of this series. It's the unclean spirits that were used to be inside these large giant bodies before the flood. Well, their bodies got destroyed at the flood, and so now they're unclean spirits on the earth under the control of Satan, as Jubilees expounds and First Enoch expounds. This is why we see them in the scriptures. Yeshua has to deal with them everywhere he goes, and as so do Peter and Paul. They have to deal with unclean spirits as well. These are what the nations, even all the way back, like Yahweh in Deuteronomy 33:27. You have to look in the Greek and in the Hebrew, but it's because there's different variances of translation. But ultimately, we all understand that the idols, the idolatry, the worship of the Baals, and the different Ashtaroths and idols and all that stuff was symbolically a carving with wood, metal, or stone. But the entities that they worshipped that did manifestations through their rituals, which still happens today with witchcraft, those are the unclean spirits, right? Even though an idol may have been carved to a former king or Nimrod or Baal, who's Baal, or Apollyon, the spiritual aspect of the deceptions, the familiar spirits that would inhabit those rituals and possess people and do false prophecies and all the things that happen within witchcraft and the occult, those are the forces of evil that we have to deal with, the spiritual wickedness, okay? The world's darkness, if you will. So all of them, guys, are conspiring against mankind. I want you to take that in, if you can, for just a second. They used to have bodies. They used to walk upon the earth like normal men. They try to, again, if they can possess a body. And they continually did the ways of Babylon before the flood, right? Before Babylon was technically received that name. And they are continuing that behavior and trying to trick and perpetrate, attack, and destroy mankind, as Jubilees 10 expounds and explains. And this is the people that we're told that this is our main fight. This is what Paul's trying to say. This is the main fight. And there were lots of them, untold, who knows how many. Lots and lots of these Nephilim spirits that now a tenth of them were left under the control of Mastema, or Satan character. And they're now the entities that we have to deal with. So all of them are conspiring against mankind. This is the Father expressing to you through his word. He talked about it being that, quote unquote, little g gods of the nations in the past, and the demons they sacrifice their children to. Psalm 104, Deuteronomy, Exodus 16, Leviticus 17, Psalm 104, and a whole bunch of other places, right? That they were called demons that they sacrificed their children to, unclean spirits. They're all conspiring against humanity. En masse, huge group, constantly trying to thwart us. So this is the Father trying to give you the proper definition of what a conspiracy is. It's not someone that actually questions when they see something wrong, they see something untrue, or they see something that's some sort of red flag because it's clearly a false deception. That's not the definition. That's the enemy twisting the true definition of a conspiracy for their purpose, to use it as a tool to try to diminish you, marginalize you, make you look stupid. The Father is telling you, these are the true conspirators right here. And they're under the authority of this guy. He was, according to First Enoch, he was in the mix of the other angels. Apparently, he didn't get the same punishment as the other 200 that took wives. But it says that he also, like the other rebellious angels, it says that Azazel, the Satan character, the dragon, he also was in the mix during that time in the days of Jared and was teaching mankind all types of lawlessness. And he still has been ever since. Revelation 12:17. The dragon was enraged at the woman and went to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. You guys noticing a pattern yet? The people that call you conspiracy people are those who hate the fact that you're covenant kids. You're covenant children of the Most High. You keep the commandments of God, the testimony of Yeshua, which is the high priest of God given for you, who does the commandments on your behalf. Not that you don't have to do the command. I'm talking about the priestly duties, commandments pertaining to his priesthood. The whole thing here, right, is talking about the commandments of God. You are a part of that through your faith and belief, your action, obviously, your discipleship. So therefore, inherently, you stepped into a situation where the forces, the spiritual world, darkness, the forces of evil, are conspiring against you. And they've got several component pieces to do that. They got this Azazel character. We're going to go over Apollyon here in a minute. They have the unclean spirits, and they have the deception of the kings of the earth that turn on their own people and on themselves, and because of their deluded mindsets. The insanity that the Wisdom of Solomon chapter 2 expresses about the unrighteous and how their mind goes into insanity. They're not thinking straight at all. Revelation 9, 13, and 17, we're going to cover some big, broad things here. I'm going to expound on these ideas at greater depth in the following 7 parts of this series. So please be patient with me teasing some of these concepts to you right now, but we're going to expound on this with greater depth later. The king of Babylon, Revelation 9:11. They were ruled by a king, the angel of the abyss. His name is, in Hebrew, is Abaddon, and in Greek it is Apollyon. So what's up with this guy? Well, Revelation 9 says he comes up out of the pit, out of the abyss, with a whole bunch of other things, and he's a king over them. So he's a king, but why in Revelation 17, the other kings give their power to this king? So it says in verse 8 and also 11 through 13, the beast that you saw, it was, this is in the days of John, about 2,000 years ago, the angel was explaining to John that the beast he saw, it was, now is no more. That means in the days of John, the king of Babylon, specifically this one that comes up out of the pit, is not, means he's not on the earth now. He's not during the days of John. He's not on the earth. So no, it's not Antiochus Epiphanes of the 300 BC, and it's not Titus of Rome or any of the subsequent emperors. Yes, they worship the beast through sun worship, but it's not literally him. So it says the beast that you saw, it was, yeah, he was alive as the king of Babylon, is not now. No, he wasn't alive. He's not alive now, nor was he alive during the days of John, but is about to come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. And those who dwell on the earth, whose names were written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel when they see the beast that was and is not and yet will be. So this is telling you in very clear language, this dude's coming back. He's not here now. He's coming back. He was here a long time ago. He's not now. He's coming back. And the people of the world who are deceived will marvel at this. The beast that was and now is not is the 8th king, who belongs to the other 7 and is going into destruction. Yes, he does belong to the other 7 because he's the 8th. He was the first and the 8th. He will be the 8th. He was the first. It says, the 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but will receive 1 hour of authority as kings along with the beast. These kings have one purpose, to yield their power and authority to the beast. So then we got this beast character that comes up out of the abyss, out of the pit, and these kings that are given power give all their authority to him, but is he the final authority? Who is this beast that came up out of the abyss? Who's he ruled by? Well, it says in Revelation 13, 7 and 8, then the beast was permitted to wage war against the saints to conquer them, and it was given authority. It was given authority. It tells you, by the way, in verse 4 and 5, the dragon gives him his authority to wage war against the saints. So he's under the authority of Satan, the dragon, who wages war against those who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Yeshua. You guys see the hierarchy here? Satan, King Apollyon, and the kings of the earth. That's the evil hierarchy there of darkness. And then the unclean spirits are in the mix working for them as well. So these are the forces of Mordor. Okay? And the all-seeing eye is very appropriate because it's literally the symbol of both Satan and the king of Babylon. So all these who's written, it just goes on to say that the beast was permitted to wage war against the saints to conquer them. It was given authority over every tribe, people, tongue, and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life belonging to the Lamb who was slain. So it goes on to expound later that I know it seems like it makes a blanket statement that all who live on the earth, except those whose names have not been written in the book of life, meaning that there will be people that will not worship him. And of course, those people will be martyred or persecuted. So, par for the course throughout all of history, mass conspiracy, the entire world is going to be coming against the people that refuse to worship the beast. So the Father is telling you the true conspiracies that are coming, and the ones that were here in the past, and all the signs of how they actually work. Whereas the enemy will try to tell you that the fact that you're noticing these behaviors, suddenly you're the conspiracy theorist. That you're noticing that they're literally killing children. Oh, suddenly you're the conspiracy theorist. Oh, they're abducting children. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Yet the Father tells me in Revelation 18 that it's the people of Babylon were trafficking human souls, and they will be stopped. Same thing that was happening in the days of Zephaniah and same thing that is prophesied in the days of Joel about the coming of the Lord in chapter 3, Joel chapter 3, where he's going to give recompense to those who sold their sons and daughters as prostitutes, human trafficking, specifically sex child trafficking. More of the practices of Babylon that are happening that Revelation addresses that these people are permitting. Children of the covenant, people who keep the commandments, testimony of Yeshua, are not doing those things. So when Yeshua has to come, he has to stop the bad people from doing all these practices of Babylon. He's got to stop Babylon so he can save his children. So let's look at something real quick, guys, because as you saw, on the thumbnail, we looked at, I referenced the idea of where this ancient Egyptian Eye of Ra and Eye of Horus, which also can be assimilated with Osiris, where these ideas came from ancient Egypt. They're worshiping the sun god, Ra worship, Osiris worship. Same thing the Greeks did with Helios, later translated to the Romans with Apollonius. This is why we see Apollo come up out of the pit in Revelation 9. We've talked about that in part 9 of this series in the King of Babylon. I go into great depth. If you haven't seen that episode, go back and check it out in the playlist. But I also had the Eye of Ra, the Eye of Horus on the thumbnail, as well as the statue of Molech, which is one of the representations of Baal. Molech and Baal are synonymous with different worship. Much of it had to do with child human sacrifice. That is also happening in the world today. I've done videos and had breakdowns on that in other videos as well, even to the point where there's a altar to Molech in the United Nations Meditation Room. The what? The United Nations Meditation Room. In New York, there's a meditation room in that building where all the people come together from the different nations to make plans for what? Whose plans are they abiding in? Plans for covenant of Yahweh or Babylon, kingdom of Babylon? And in that building, they have a meditation room with an altar to Molech. Babylon is everywhere. It's alive and well, guys. The King Messiah, when he returns, he'll have to stop it because mankind can't. That's an active conspiracy happening today. The United Nations literally, they're not about peace. They're about coordinating so that they can overcome the saints. I also went over that in great detail in a previous episode where I broke down the Lucius Trust and how they were the originating consultants for the United Nations and how they were straight up occultists. One of them was a 32nd degree Freemason, and the wife was writing eugenic stuff, and she was a modern day witch, basically. So these people have taken off the black robes of Babylon. They put on suits and they put on white coats to be researchers and scientists and figure out ways to create harmful things with pharmakia, as well as enact, with their suits on, they can act harmful laws against the children of the covenant. And this is what the Father tells us all throughout the scriptures. This fight has been going on since the rebellious watchers decided to take wives and do this stuff. Now, some people would say, hey, it even goes back to the garden, right? Genesis 3, the serpent deceives Eve and Adam. They eat the apple. Yes, but technically, according to the definition of a conspiracy, you don't have a group of people coming after humans to destroy them until you get to the days of Jared, to the days of the rebellious watchers. And their behavior has been perpetuated throughout all these different nations, throughout all this different time. And I mean, it's the same concept. And the one that made it through pre-flood, post-flood, this Azazel character, and didn't get locked away, who assumed control over these Nephilim spirits that initiated the practice of all this destructive Babylonian behavior, inspired the men who created the actual city and Tower of Babylon post-flood, perpetrating the same behavior throughout history, throughout all the different nations. You guys think because they stopped doing the tower, they couldn't communicate anymore, that they stopped practicing this behavior when they went back home? No, they were already, like I tried to share, I think it was episode 1 or part 1 of the series. They were already doing the idolatrous worship of the Watchers and the Nephilim before they built the tower. That was one of the things that led them to all come together en masse, conspire to build the tower. So if that wasn't enough, and then we also went over and we expressed this idea of ancient flying machines and how this was the vehicle of these quote-unquote gods and these rulers back in the day, and that it helped them control over the people because it was advanced tech, if you will. We have that same, I have all the other practices of Babylon being infiltrated throughout all the different nations today. We have all the nations conspiring today to figure out a way to stop the children of the covenant from doing covenant behavior, and they're about to release, so to speak, disclose the same type of vehicles of the gods of Baal and Moloch and Ashtaroth, the Nephilim, the gods of ancient cultures. They're about to reveal those same things in the modern day. And this has to happen, guys, because it's Jesus is not going to be wrong when he said that when he returns, it'll be like the days of Noah. There's going to be Nephilim running around. There's going to be the tech of ancient Babylon flying around. There's going to be the building projects of ancient Babylon. They're already starting them today. They've already done, smaller scale, they do them, but they're starting mega projects already. And of course, the implemental societal practices have been ongoing this whole time, specifically pharmakia and human trafficking. So this is where I had last episode in part 12, I had West Blaze and Wits It Gets It, Austin from Wits It Gets It on. And I kind of got distracted because I was trying to talk with them and interact and go through my information. And there was a lot of information I actually didn't get to cover and I left out of last time. Then I thought, well, I'll include it this week to the best of my ability. And but also because I do another series on West Blaze Music's channel, I actually covered some of that information on West Blaze's channel. I'm not sure if everyone who follows this series has seen that series. So I'm going to play a clip from that because it actually expounds upon the transportation vehicles of ancient Babylon and how they're being brought back out as a form of deception. Literally, the governments of the world currently are conspiring about the quote-unquote disclosure of these things, and they're calling them something they're not. They're going to be calling them alien visitors from a cosmological model that we're not created in. So that's the whole story is built on a lie, and it's all a form of mass deception that the world's leaders are conspiring to do in the next 20 to 30 years. And they're supposedly going to be doing it in the next year or two. So I'll just play you this clip from our last episode over at Uncommon Ground, where I expound upon how these things are actually just ancient Babylonian concepts and much of it from ancient India. I mean, for the last 70, 80 years has just been nonstop, every year pushed with every form of media you can imagine. Comic books, magazines, movies, TV, everything you can imagine, guys. Literal government agencies talking about it. I mean, they've got what the government agency called SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. I believe that's where they have all the telescopes and everything, and they're pointing them at space, and supposedly they're just pointing them at the firmament. But
like in the movie Contact, Jodie Foster.
Like Contact, that's right. So they have millions and millions of dollars going towards the propaganda that all this alien stuff is real. But guys, we want to try to share some ideas with you from history tonight that hopefully will help you understand this is nothing new under the sun. This is actually repackaged, just like we've said on this show and also on my channel. NASA, their whole theology, their whole view and teachings of the heliocentric cosmology is repackaged from ancient India and specifically from Vishnu and some of the multiverse and cosmic belief sets that was propagated by Vishnu and Brahma from ancient India. So another unique parallel with ancient India are these ideas of vimanas. And what a lot of people don't realize is that vimanas are what we're seeing in the sky when people take home video and when clips are being released by the news. In ancient Sanskrit, vimana means measuring out and to traversing. Basically a craft that goes forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Bowdoin professor of Sanskrit at Oxford University in England in 1890 translated the word vimana as the chariot of the gods. But we're not talking about the God of heaven and earth.
No.
We're talking about other gods, Nephilim gods. So it goes on to say, this is some of the writing of ancient India, specifically in the Bhagavad Gita Maratha, I think is what it's called, speaking about different types of vimanas, what they called flying craft of the gods. The Pushpaka Vimana was a gigantic plane the size of a large city, entirely capable of holding unlimited numbers of people, as stated by Professor D.K. Kanjalal's observations of the Matsya Purana, which is one of their Vedic texts, their religious texts. So guys, this is telling you that they had massive, what did we see West plays in movies like Independence Day?
Yeah. I mean, so many of them.
A big plane that could be an entire city by itself. Hey guys, we are going to talk about that in subsequent episodes. I mentioned it briefly, and I think it was part 4 or 5 where we talked about the ancient flying machines. But I'm going to go in greater depth in this series about these ideas of floating cities. You'd be surprised how much historical record speaks of this kind of stuff. So just a little teaser for future parts of this series. Hopefully you'll enjoy it later.
That would fill up the entire camera angle view of the sky, you know, at least. So yeah, a massive city-sized craft, and as big as this creation is, it would not. I wouldn't put it past the elite to have something like that hidden.
That's right. And they go on to expound about what these things were, how they worked. There's an incredible amount of information in ancient Sanskrit that details who flew them, how they were used for war, how they controlled people, how they were given to the gods. And so right here, it says in Sanskrit in the Samaranganana Sutradhara, I don't think I said that right.
You did pretty good.
It's an ancient Vedic text, and it says it's written that the strong and durable must the body of the vana be made, like a great flying bird of light material. Inside, one must put the mercury engine with its iron heating apparatus underneath. By means of the power latent in the mercury, which sets the driving whirlwind in motion. The what? The mercury engine sets the driving whirlwind in motion. What do we see from all these UFO sightings? That these planes or these craft that are moving through the clouds are usually spinning. I got a picture.
Yeah. Okay, I got
later.
you.
Yeah.
And it's reminiscent also of like when Ezekiel is caught up into the heaven. It's like a fake of that, like a
right.
Yeah.
So he goes on to say, driving a whirlwind in motion, a man sitting inside may travel a great distance in the sky. The movements of the vimana are such that it can vertically ascend and vertically descend, and moving slanting forwards. These descriptions are incredible. Moving slanting forwards and backward. With the help of the machines, human beings can fly in the air, and heavenly beings can come down to earth.
All right.
Interesting.
How interesting. How old would you say this? Like
these texts are supposed to be 3,000 to 4,000 years old.
Have mercy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Long before the modern invention of electricity, right?
Right. We're talking Tower of Babel days, guys. So at Rama's, here's another quote from some of their writings. At Rama's behest, the magnificent chariot rose up to a mountain of cloud with a tremendous din. That word din means like a tremendous blast of power.
Okay.
Another passage reads, the Bhima flew with his vimana on an enormous ray, which was as brilliant as the sun and made a noise like the thunder of a storm. Like
a ray of light?
It sounds like a rocket blast, right?
Yeah.
He flew
fire.
Fire array. So these are just a few descriptions. It goes on to say in another passage, according to the Dranaparva, part of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, one vimana described was shaped like a sphere, and it borne along at great speed on a mighty wind generated by mercury. And that also is referred to as quicksilver. Mercury is also known in history as quicksilver. So,
wow.
Right. It's telling you that it has propulsion according to this Mercury. We're going to go into that in a minute and how NASA uses it. I'm actually going to show you guys later NASA's when the actual ion propulsion Mercury engine that NASA invented in the 70s and gave to the Smithsonian. I got a picture of it.
Okay.
So it goes on to say, in the Laws of the Babylonians, which is this particular book that was written in Mesopotamia in Sanskrit. I'm going to go over the history of that in just a minute because a lot of people are going, wait a minute. I thought the Babylonians were in Mesopotamia and the Indians were in India. What's going on here? Just give me a minute. I'll explain. In the Laws of the Babylonians, written in Sanskrit, part of the passage of the Hakata, it and unambiguously states that the privilege of operating a flying machine is great. The knowledge of flight is among the most ancient of our inheritances, a gift from those upon high. We received it from them as a means of saving many lives.
No
Guys,
way.
what have we been talking about? About the false Christs that would appear. What's the world been prepping through all these movies with aliens, that there's good aliens that are going to come help us to fight off the bad aliens.
And what is a Christ? A savior.
A savior.
Saving many lives. So wild.
It's crazy, guys. So this is ancient Babylonian depictions of Vimanas used by Babylonian rulers in Mesopotamia. They're everywhere. They're literally sitting in one of these saucer-shaped crafts in the sky. So it goes on to say, a lot of people may be asking Wes, right, but wait, Sean, I thought Sanskrit was an ancient Indian language. Why are the Babylonians in Mesopotamia talking about it? Well, PhD Indian philosophy,
Peter
Sahata, he actually is a historian as well, and he explains that during the mid-second millennial, which is 1500 BCE, this is probably during the days of Joshua, Indo-Aryan tribes migrated both east into India and west into northern Mesopotamia. And through an Indo-Aryan wedge, as new waves of Indo-European migrants came down into present-day Iran, the earlier wave was wedged apart. Those who went west became sort of a ruling elite of the Hurrian people to form a powerful Mitanni kingdom. The evidence for this is seen in a treaty between the Mitanni and the Hittites. The Hittites, well, that sounds biblical.
It sure does.
Sounds like the Amorites and the Hittites that lived in right next to Iran in Assyria. Like, okay, so anyway, I'm being a little facetious, guys. Just the point is, all these tribes and cultures work together. The Bible is super relevant. This is the people that the Israelites were dealing with that were worshiping false gods. Those false gods and their rulers had crafts that they actually flew in the sky to perpetrate deception and power over their peoples. This is why they received worship as gods. This is why the God of the Bible was so intent on telling the Israelites, hey, don't believe all that. They're not real gods. They had deceptive signs and wonders even back then. So it goes on to say that the Mitanni Sanskrit is considered to be a slightly more archaic form of Sanskrit than the Vedic Sanskrit. Sadly, these people seem to have got lost in subsequent history, but thankfully, those who went to India are keeping this tradition alive. So here's an Indian philosophy history PhD telling you that, yes, these two cultures, the Babylonians and the Indians, had intermingled all the way back to 3,500 years ago. And Mikey is back with us. What's up, Mikey?
Thank you for rejoining us, brother.
Thank you for having me back, guys. Sorry about that.
No worries. And anybody who has not seen, I would highly recommend the entire series. If you go to Kingdom Cast, that's Sean's backup channel. He's got a whole series called Investigating Babylon. There was a episode of that called Flying Machines, of the Ancient Flying Machines, something along that effect. That is an amazing breakdown of more detailed presentation of what he was just talking about. It's
I'm just giving you snippets right now. We're actually getting a little bit deeper into the India history about this with the Vimanas. But if you guys check out that series, I go over the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, all those guys, because they all had the same tech. They all shared the same theology. They just had different names for it because they spoke different languages after the tower. So it's the same deception perpetrated on every nation. That's why they all worshipped a version of Baal. Here's the point. In the Indologist, William Clarendon, so another Indian researcher and expert of ancient India, he says he has written down a detailed description of the Mercury vortex engine in his translation of the Samaranga Sutra Dhara, and he quotes this: inside the circular airframe of this craft, where the engine is, place the Mercury engine with its solar Mercury boiler at the aircraft center. By means of the power latent in the heated Mercury, which sets the driving whirlwind in motion, a man sitting inside may travel a great distance in a most marvelous manner. 4 strong Mercury containers must be built into the Vimana. The Vimana develops thunder power through the Mercury.
Oh yeah, they're building these things right now behind our backs.
Oh yeah,
they have been.
Thunderpound.
Yeah, this is.
If they have this much detail, like that's all they need. Like, okay, we can figure this out.
Well, you guys remember that specifically Hitler took a whole group of SS to ancient Tibet and ancient India in the 30s, specifically seeking out the information of the Aryans, which they believe were the gods. Yeah. And this was how those guys traveled around. This is what we talked about in my Kingdom Cast episode about the Bell Project, the Nazi Bell Project. Yeah. So this here it goes on to say, according to this is going to be a tough word. I'm going to try it though. According, this is another text from the Vimanika Sutra. It goes on to say, according to the Rahasya Ginahadi Hakarai, Sutra number 2.
Very good.
The pilot, it's talking about the pilot of Vimanas. The pilot is one who knows the secrets. There were 32 secrets the pilot needed to learn from the competent preceptors, and only such a person was fit to be entrusted with an airplane, and no others. There are 32 secrets of the working of the Vimana. He must know the structure of the aeroplane, know the means of its takeoff and ascent to the sky, know how to drive it, and know how to halt it when necessary, how to maneuver it, and make it perform spectacular feats in the sky without crashing. Those secrets are given in the Rahashya Laha. And this, I have a citation at the very bottom here. It's from this quote is from the Aeronautical Society of India in present day by G.R. Joycer, International Academy of Sanskrit Research from 1973.
Wow. And Mikey, while you were gone, we were discussing that these concepts come from ancient India and that area from 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. They had these flying machines. Yes, bro. Yes.
So it goes on to say in that same I can't repeat the words, but in that same place I just quoted from, that same text, it goes on to say this. This is a specific maneuver one of those pilots had to know how to do. And it's called the Gudha. As explained in the Vayatatavava Prakarana, I totally messed that up. I'm sorry. If anyone's out there from India, I'm so sorry. It says, by harnessing the powers, the yasa, the viyasa, the prayayasa, in the 8th atmospheric layer covering the Earth to attract the dark content of the solar ray and use it to hide the Vimana from the enemy.
Bruh.
Guys.
Stealth technology.
Guys, what are we looking at? This is the official... the official Navy photo released in the United States of the UAP, the unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Blacked out.
UFO. It's blacked out. How many of these have we seen where they're blacked out? And you wonder, why are they blacked out? Why can't I get any description of them? Why can't I see?
There's no details in it, right? Yeah. It takes the dark content of the solar ray, like dark matter.
It's manipulating. You know how in the it's manipulating the different types of light within solar light.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's putting off some kind of glow, it looks like.
This is just one maneuver. I'm going to get to another one where it makes it shine. You guys ready?
Yeah.
This is
like it's like names for anime attacks. Go ahead.
Yeah, literally. This is the Drashya. This means to be unseen. By collision of the electric power and the wind power in the atmosphere, a glow is created whose reflection is to be caught in the Vishwa Kriyadrapana, or it's a mirror at the front of the Vimana. And by its manipulation, they can make that shine, that glow, as camouflage over the Vimana.
Yeah, because it's not blacked out there; it's whited out, and that is we see that in
we see that all the time.
Videos. Yeah,
all these home videos of people catching these glowing orbs going through the sky at crazy speeds of defying left, right, up, down, defying physics. Supposedly, they're glowing. You can't get a beat on them, even with modern good cameras. They literally have their own version of stealth camouflage, black and or glowing. This is an ancient technique from ancient Vedic texts.
That's wild.
Nothing new under the sun, guys. Nothing new. This is why they don't want anyone to know history. They have to teach all these watered down versions. They spend how many years teaching you about the American Civil War and the American Revolution and the War of 1812. But how many times did you learn about ancient India culture and history of the gods?
Or 4,000-year-old flying machines? It would completely contradict their narrative.
So here's some glowing orbs.
Bright white lights.
Here's some glowing orbs. This is not Starlink, guys. This was taken in 2013. Oh, they're gone. Oh, it's back.
Nope. Oh, that one's
Two of them are just chilling. One's hanging out, and they're all going to start moving once they get information of some sort. Oh, it's going to get even crazier, guys. Stick with us if you're still watching right now. Looks like we had like 140 people watching active. Well, there's more than that watching. There's 140 people in the chat.
Cool.
So guys, if you like what we're talking about and this is entertaining or exciting or interesting to you, hit that thumbs up. So this is it's just a little bit there of go watch that episode. It's on West Plays Music's channel. It's the most recent episode, number 8. The Alien Deception is the title of the episode. And we go into even more depth about some of the unique moves those ancient Vimana pilots had to know. And I also show more, modern day footage of venerating those types of ancient writings and what's going on there. But how interesting, though, specifically I wanted to stop here on this moment where it's going over this glowing Vimana concept. Because, as we also broke down in that particular episode as well, and Ephesians 6 and also Revelation 12, 7 through 10, the idea of the Greek word agalos, which is translated often as angel, but it's just a word messenger, and it can be used of angels, demons, or even humans in the New Testament. And it is used of all three at different places. But how interesting, we have that verse in Paul where he talks about fire, even an angel of light to come to you with a different gospel. A messenger of light that would come to you with a different gospel. So we know that not only Satan himself, because of the way their bodies are constructed, being a made of water and spirit, being of an angelic capacity, he could make light protrude from himself. So most people just simply think that, oh, it must be referring to Satan. But you also see this idea of people being abducted by light, and then they're told a message. This is 100% modern stuff, modern testimonies that goes back to ancient occultic behaviors. So this is why the Father in Deuteronomy 18 and Deuteronomy 13 specifically gave us a litmus test for any messages we would get. And that's what Paul's trying to play upon in his letter, where he's trying to say, look, man, if someone comes to you with a different message, even an angel of light, because if you don't know the message, the one of the Creator and his covenant, his Torah, his Son, the priesthood, the resurrection, the day of the Lord, the coming of the kingdom of God, the New Jerusalem, if you don't know the actual story in Scripture, then you can be fooled by a messenger of light. Whether that happens with a person showing up in your room or whether it happens with a craft showing up over your house. So these things, guys, all this stuff is the same line, false signs and wonders that the unclean spirits and their lackeys, the kings of the earth and the people of their little priesthood, they get to do their occultic priestly behavior. They've been fooling mankind with this type of stuff for, all the way back to the tower. This is the religion of Babylon and their false prophets, their false line, signs, and wonders, their false promises. It's the ways of Babylon. It is just one more layer, if you will, of this ridiculously stinky onion of Babylon that we're trying to peel back for you to understand. Not only is deception coming, it's already been here, but there's a much bigger deception coming that will, if you know history and you know Scripture, is about to tie us directly into prophecy that is truly, truly astounding. To me, it's one of those deals where, my goodness, it's time to pray up. Get right with the Father. Learn his ways. Confess your sins to Yeshua. He's your high priest. Put your faith in adopting his ways so that you don't fall for the deceptions of Babylon. Many people have asked me, as we've gone through this series, they've asked in email and in Patreon messages and different things. It's come from multiple people, not just one person. They're asking me if I'm going to take these Investigating Babylon episodes and make one video out of it. And you can do that with the playlist. That's why I'm putting them all on a playlist as I broadcast them. But I want to say yes. I would like to do that. I think that might be prudent, and I'm probably going to take out so imagine everything. All these this is part 13, right? So imagine all the Q&As that we do at the end, all the technical mess ups that I've had, all the intros and the commercials and things. Like if I did an actual video that compiled all this series, I would probably take all that stuff, and it would probably take me a while to make it, just because I got a lot of other stuff on my plate right now. So just to answer everyone that's been asking, yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that sounds beneficial, and I think that would be great. If someone wants to help me with that, you're welcome to reach out to me, because it would require lots of editing, and it would require, a lot of time right now I just don't have. So, maybe if we work together as a body, we can figure that out. But yeah, I think it's a good idea. It could help just, compile the info down into little segments, and it won't have to be 21 2-hour episodes. It just could be, who knows, maybe we could compile it down into like 3 hours if possible. So either way, we can look at that in the future when I finish the series. Because who knows, some of you might think I'm crazy by the time we finish the series, because it's going to get crazier, guys. Do you think flying Vimanas and Apollyon come out of the pit, you think that's crazy? It's about to get it's going to get crazier. So I just everyone that sticks with me, kudos to you. But I'm just trying to show what I see in the scriptures, and show what we can observe in life, and put those two together in a very logical, reasonable, contextual way, if I can, and see what happens. And so far, this has been what's happening, these 13 episodes that you've seen so far. So guys, if y'all have any questions about what we talked about tonight, or any scriptures, I'll give it about 10 minutes or so to answer some questions. Put them in all capitalization in the chat if you'd like me to answer one of your questions. And then I'll be glad to answer any of those questions if you have any. So just let me know. Oh, thanks, AC. I appreciate it. You said you've been watching this series from the start. Each time, you can't wait for the next episode. Good stuff. Appreciate it, brother. He pulls the sand. They say biblical cosmology isn't important. It's going to be super important very soon. Firmament is not a canopy. Firmament is not okay. I'm not sure what you mean by the last part, but I agree with you. Biblical cosmology. I know the firmament is kind of described like a canopy in Isaiah 40 and other places, but I know it's not literally. It's shaped like a canopy with its Amos 9:6, its domed shape. But I guess I don't quite understand that last part. But either way, I agree with you. Cosmology is super important. Helps you understand the gospel of the kingdom, and helps you understand how not to be deceived. Okay, looks like the line within us is asking, who may be operating the modern day Vimanas? Unclean spirits, possessed people, the elite? I would say, I don't know about possessed people entirely. I don't think you have to possess them to do that. So, but I agree with the first and the third option. So it'd be, the elite choosing pilots, or unclean spirits themselves. This is where we're going to get into this later as we dig deeper into Revelation chapter 9 and some ideas that goes with transhumanism. But it's very possible that they've already figured out a way to give unclean spirits a host body so that they can interact. Because clearly we know that's kind of the thing about unclean spirits, is they already want to possess a real host body, which mankind walking around, and they do effectively. They have for thousands of years. Yeshua's kicking them out of people. So what if they create an artificial body? So that way the normal human body doesn't start to break down and have biological health issues because it's unnatural possession. So what if they could create some sort of synthetic body that could handle that possession, or just be easily disposed and given a new body? Kind of like there's this Netflix series, I can't remember what it's called, but they talk about this idea. They call them sleeves, where you just go and get a new body, a new cloned created body that doesn't have any entity or any soul that's animating it, and then you can just download your soul into that and you create a new sleeve. So I could see them using something like that with transhumanism for unclean spirits, and which I'm going to talk about that in future episodes, because what a lot of people don't realize is the whole idea of reincarnation, the whole idea of that came from ancient India, and it was only promised to the gods. And only later, through different caste systems that came through different rulers later, where they finally said that, oh yeah, if you're a good citizen, we'll give you the ability to reincarnate later. But originally it was never for the average person. It was only for the gods. So I think that that's interesting. But ultimately, and a lot of people have asked, Line Within Us, I think you have a military background, I think. But I know a lot of people have asked me, well, how in the world could a human pilot be in one of those crafts the way they move? Wouldn't that just like turn their internal organs to mush? Like, how could they actually stand those G-forces and that acceleration, that kind of stuff? Supposedly, and I didn't go over this technical piece of info, but I went over the Mercury engine that I alluded to in that clip. Go back and watch the whole episode if you haven't seen it. To anyone watching me right now, I alluded to the Mercury engine that NASA replicated and built in the 70s. That's now in the Smithsonian. And this was what's described in ancient Vedic text from ancient India as this Mercury engine, the way it powers and shoots quickly and has the power to move as these Vimanas, we see them move. So supposedly because it's considered an ion propulsion that works off the mercury vapor, something about the ion propulsion creates a protective bubble around the Vimana so that you don't experience G-forces like a normal plane. So yeah, I think I'm answering way more than you asked, but either way, hopefully that's a decent answer for you, brother. Thank you, D-Love. I appreciate the support. Thank you. Yeah, Jed, that's right. It was called Altered Carbon. And in fact, if you go at the end of their episodes, I didn't watch the whole series. I watched like 3 or 4 of them because I could clearly see all the transhumanism, Nephilim agenda, that kind of stuff. And I remember at the end of one of their episodes, they have like a little stylistic little drawing of white light on a black background, and it literally draws out a cone-shaped Nephilim head. Has nothing to do with the series. It's like the last 5 seconds of episode 8 or something like that. It's hilarious, man. Like, they're just throwing it right in her face, guys. Throwing it right in her face. All right. Mars Leader 88, hilarious name. I went camping with my church and they wanted to study James. They said that the law of liberty was liberty from the law. Interesting reversal of ideas. What is the law of liberty? Sorry, it's off topic. It's okay. It's all right. Let me go to something real quick. My computer. And I'll show you. Because I actually have the verse. One second. If I can get my computer to work. Oh, that's not it. That's unfortunate. Well, I thought I had it labeled and organized. The law of liberty is the law of God, by the way. Just throwing that out there. So let's go to James real quick. Let me pull up scriptures for you to look at. Issues. 1 second. The short answer is it's the law of God. That's literally what sets you free. Psalm 119, I think it's verse 28. I run in the path of freedom, for I run in your commands. And then it also find the verse real quick here in James. Okay. Thanks for your patience. So here's the overarching context that we always want to look for context when people start giving us little bumper sticker phrases. Like a little term called the law of liberty, and then they try to give you the definition of what they think that term means. So if we look here in James chapter 1, verse 22, it says, be doers of the word, not only hearers. What is the word that you're doers of? So James actually goes on to expound about that in chapter 2, verses 22 through 24. But right here, he says, be doers of the word, and not only hearers. That's the word of God. Remember, the book of James was not written when James is talking to whomever he's talking to. The people that he's discipling and writing this letter to, they don't have the book of Galatians. They don't have Corinthians or Romans. They barely have any of the gospel testimonies beyond the actual verbal testimonies of the disciples in Jerusalem. So they don't have like the written New Testament like we have today. Everyone they discipled, everyone that James brought to Christ and is now writing a letter to further their discipleship process, he taught them from the Old Testament. That's the only word there's any contextual reference to that he's referring to here. Be doers of the word. That is the law of God. That is for the law of the prophets, like Yeshua kept, observed, and taught us to do. He goes on to say, otherwise you are deceiving yourselves. For anyone who hears the word but does not carry it out is like a man who looks at his face in a mirror and after observing himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. Again, there's only one word he's referring to. Verse 25, but the one who looks intently into the perfect law of freedom, or liberty as some would say, because it is the perfect law. If you read Psalm 118, it's God's law is perfect. His ways are just. It's without, there's no way to be imperfect. See, I'm with the so God's not going to call God's not going to call himself. Here it is. Okay, 1 second, guys. Maybe I can just put it over here. 1 second. I was thinking it was like 63, but it's not. Okay, so check this out. This is the psalmist, and he was saying, I'll just start up here. So this is in Psalm 119, verse 41. He says, may your loving devotion come to me, O Lord, your salvation according to your promises. Then I can answer him who taunts, for I trust in your word. That's the same word that James is referring to. Never take your word of truth from my mouth. That's the word of truth. For I hope in your judgments. I will always obey your law forever and ever, and I will walk in freedom. For I have sought your precepts. That's another word that means ordinances or law. I will speak of your testimonies before kings, and I will not be ashamed. I delight in your commands because I love them. I lift up my hands to your commandments, which I love, and I meditate on your statutes. Statutes, also another word for precepts and law and judgments and testimonies. So all this right here is talking about the same thing, and the psalmist calls it freedom. This is why James is also referring to the word that he taught them. He says, if you were doers of the word and not just hearers, right? So don't fool yourself and just hear it and think that you're okay. Now you know he wants you to go do it. Then you'll be walking in freedom because you'll be walking in the law of God, his precepts, judgments, statutes, ordinances, and his ways. That's his behavior. So that's what we want to practice. So with all respect to the people who are misguided, to share that with you. Send them a couple of my videos, and if they're a pastor and they'd actually like to talk to me about some of these definitions, you're welcome to give my email, kingdomincontext@gmail.com, and I interview pastors all the time, and I'll be glad to have a conversation with them if they're willing. You're welcome, Lisa. Hopefully that's helpful for you. Shannon Polk, I appreciate your question. I just don't know. I'm sorry I don't have a good answer for you. I saw you asked that earlier during the beginning. I really don't know, brother. Whether they're literally looking at the stars or not, looking for signs that, because remember, the occult is huge into astrology. They are huge into trying to figure out the signs of the heavens and how it somehow will. Let me put it like this: the elites that practice high level occult, they are into astrology to the point where they make certain decisions based off of the signs and the stars. This is why they also worship the gods they attribute to the signs and the stars. It's all kind of connected. So, are they truly? They're not looking into deep space. They're looking literally just into through the water medium between us and the stars in the upper layers of the firmament. So If there's something that some grand discovery that they're trying to make on a regular basis that I'm not aware of, I apologize. I'm just not aware of it. Okay, guys, I appreciate it. I don't see any more other questions. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. Hopefully this was a fun episode, and we'll be moving. We're moving out of our middle period. Remember, I said there's 21 parts of this series. The first 7 we dealt with the past, or the history of the past. Then we've been dealing with modern Babylon and some of how we see things played out that are just repeated, recycled from the past, but they're played out in our modern lives. We've been talking about all that, and then in the future episodes, which are the last 7, we're going to be going over future Babylon and how that plays out in prophecy. So appreciate it. Hopefully everyone gives us a thumbs up and shares it. And I really appreciate you guys. Deeples, go watch that episode. We talk about Little Green Men and that Uncommon Ground episode I mentioned. Go to West Plays Music, subscribe to his channel, episode 8, recent videos on his playlist. Go check that out. We talk about all that stuff too. So thank you guys. I really appreciate everybody. And we'll see you next time.